Thank you. Can you all hear me? Okay, good. Oh, it's so good to be in this beautiful space for the artwork and the space. And so thank you, Adam, for getting us all together here tonight. And with two of my favorite Montserrat people to read with. And thanks to Susan Quaitman for getting me here tonight. So I want to be happy about and thankful. So how many of you know who Carl Linnaeus is? Okay, so we have a lot of science people in the house. Years ago at Montserrat, when I was teaching a class called Observing the Natural World. Wow, I need the water already. I get choked up just thinking about it. So I was teaching this class and I had never taught it before. It was a brand new class. And I said to the students, what do you want to learn about in this nature class? And surprisingly, a big winner was taxonomy. I was surprised they knew the word. And I thought, wow, I've got to brush up on this. And so I started reading about Carl Linnaeus just in terms of the work he's done in taxonomy, which is the classification for the few people on Earth that don't seem to know, classifying, all of life, plants, animals, and realized that he was a very interesting person. And I wrote a poem about him. And then in the way that these things sometimes happen, I wrote another one and wound up then with this collection. And so I'm going to read a few poems from it. And let's see. And Linnaeus was very clear that he did not create the system of classification that we all use now. If you're any of you are gardeners or into animals, bird watchers, then you know about the system of naming, like humans are Homo sapiens, common dogs are your pet dogs or Canis domesticus. So it's this, so that we're all speaking Latin. And so we're all speaking the same language. Again, it doesn't favor anybody because nobody speaks, it's a dead language. So it's kind of a safe thing to do. Say in this world of science, we'll all speak Latin. But Linnaeus said he organized the system. It was a mess. Everybody was just throwing their own Latin names on things, classifying things together that didn't belong together. And Linnaeus went in and kind of cleaned it up. And so that's what he's referring to here. This poem is the first in the book. And it's called The Second Adam. He bestowed a name on every living thing in his world, 20,000 animals alone, and all the plants. God created, Linnaeus organized, he said modestly. In his day, they called him the second Adam, as he roamed, collected, ordered, and named his name on the tongue of every educated man, whose mother had despaired of his future, a young failure good for nothing but botany. She had planned on a more sacred vocation. Instead, he worshipped in meadows and at rough edges of fields, kneeling, picking, sniffing, completely stunned by the incredible resourcefulness of the creator. The Romantics derided this naturalist with his urge to classify, who Wordsworth wrote was a fingering slave, one that would peep and botanize upon his mother's grave. He may well have stroked that grass, greeting the plants he knew with more passion and attention than he gave to her mourners. A botany student of 26, completely stunned at her loss. It was interesting reading about him and sort of getting some small glimpse of his personal life, because he was, he was sort of living at the early part of the 1700s, kind of into the later 1700s. So it was a long time ago. And most people that I read about of that time period, you just get their kind of what they've accomplished. And I found a book that had like some letters from him, and he did have, he sort of met a scientific soulmate in a man named Peter Artetti, who was into fishes and classifying fishes. And he's known today as the father of ichthyology, the study of fishes. And so this is called My Dearest Peter. I have kept our pledge. Your book, The Beautiful Ichthyologia, will be published this month in Leyden. I hope it makes your name, your fame, as my botany books have made mine. Who would have known that when we made that pledge, ragged students in Sweden, sent by our parents to become clergymen, but finding a different kind of worship, that chance would bring us together again 3 years later in Amsterdam. I remember that long night when I brought you my new botany manuscript and you insisted on reading what you had written on your fishes. How alike we were, our minds bent on classification. You with your minute details of scale and fin, me with my petals and pistils. Now I am sorry about that night. I was so exhausted, the hour so late, the light dimming. You had been living such a lonely life, even for you, nothing but work and sleep. But you kept me so long, so unendurably long. Had I known then that I would be the one left to honor our pledge that the survivor would give to the world the observations of the other. I can never love Amsterdam, only think of the canal where just a few nights later you stumbled and drowned. Oh, I can imagine the darkness, the late hour, your mind whirling with fishes. I have named a flower for you, one of the umbrella fairy, for I know you always loved them, Artegia. So Linnaeus had several children. He had a son who was sort of to be the, keeping on the family tradition, but the son was never really interested in that stuff. He did a few things here and there, sort of rode on the coattails of his famous father, because Linnaeus was famous in this time. People came from all over the world to bring him samples of things, because you couldn't just even mail something. You couldn't take a picture of it and, drop them an email or anything like that. You had to take whatever it was you had found out in some, South American jungle and bring it to his doorstep. And people did that. And so the son never amounted to much. And he did have a daughter named Elizabeth. And this is called the Elizabeth Linnaeus phenomenon, which does exist. She knows the plants in her father's garden at Hammersby, knows that when she joins him on his botanical rambles, he cannot help himself from naming, explaining, though she is only a daughter. A sideways kind of learning, the straightforward Latin and Greek, her father's leather-bound volumes, forbidden to her. So when she sees it at dusk the first time, she does not believe her eyes, almost. But she knows she has her father's keen sight, observes as the petals of the Indian crosses seem to catch fire, watches their edges blaze each summer's evening. When night falls, what she calls her flashing flowers go dark. To know she sees enough, this level-headed Swedish girl, to know that this phenomenon is real. Writes a paper for the Royal Swedish Academy of Science concerning the flickering of the Indian crest. It is 1762. Elizabeth is only 19. What else will the world hold for her? Later, Goethe will observe flashing flowers in his own garden. The Romantic poets, enamored of electricity, will celebrate her wondrous phenomenon, a fair electric flame. And she who observed this marvel first, dead in 20 years' time at Hammersby, an army officer's wife, mother of 2 children, her name given by the Academy to a flash, a spark seen briefly at dusk. So because there wasn't a really reliable way of bringing scientific information, especially from the natural world, to the doorstep of Linnaeus or anybody else who was involved in this classification, there were a lot of tales out there. And people didn't know what to believe. There was really nothing reliable. It's kind of like today's internet. You don't know what's real and what isn't. So there were And Linnaeus, because he was, not because he was like gullible or unscientific, but because of this urge to classify everything, said that even if these things don't exist out there, I'm going to classify them. So he had a classification called cryptids, which he said were those creatures never seen by dint of their own secrecy. Okay, so cryptids. Islands have stories of little people, sneaky, malevolent, wielding the power of the powerless, to trick, to ruin, sour the milk, hide the hammer, curse the newborn child. A shadow at dawn slipping out of the cowshed, or tiny feet heard tapping across the hearth late at night. Ireland's leprechauns, Hawaii's menehune, the tro of the Orkney Islands, catch one and make it tell its secrets. Then there is Homo floresiensis, lectotype LB1, a woman 33 years old, 3 feet tall, her bones found in Lianghua Cave, 50,000 years after she died. Not a small individual, but a new species, evolved as island animals sometimes do, to become smaller. She and her species named for the island of Flores, Indonesia, where people still speak of the Ibu Gogo, small, hairy cave dwellers, who they claim kidnapped children, stole food, who they say once killed a human baby. For this, they were hunted down in the rainforest. Now people say they are all gone. Just putting together. All right. So of course, I was, I'm very enthused about Linnaeus. Did a lot of research on him, and it is always a sad thing when you see that one of your heroes also has problems, or I have problems with him. And so this poem is called "He Illumines," and it was the motto struck on a silver medal that was made in honor of Linnaeus in 1747. He once buried his silk purse, heavy with 100 ducats, to prove the divining rod was superstitious nonsense. It was said he would have classified the angels had he observable knowledge of them, but he did not, and angels remained in heaven out of his rational reach. Here on earth, he subdivided Homo sapiens into 4 taxa, classified not by custom, culture, or land of origin, but by the observable trait of skin color: Americanus, Asiaticus, Africanus, Europaeus. Later, he added these observations to his famous taxonomy. Americanus, reddish, choleric, and erect, hair black, wide nostrils, obstinate, merry, free, regulated by customs. Asiaticus, Asia. Sallow, melancholy, stiff, hair black, dark eyes, severe, haughty, avaricious, ruled by opinions. Africanus, black, phlegmatic, black hair, frizzled, nose flat, lips tumid. Women without shame, they lactate profusely, crafty, indolent, negligence, governed by caprice. Europus, white, sanguine, muscular, eyes blue, gentle, inventive, governed by laws. This Swedish botanist and lecturer toiling away in Uppsala in the midst of the Enlightenment. So my disappointment with that man. Okay, so I'm going to end here. And this is the last poem in the book, and it was indeed what he left behind, instructions for burial. What would you leave if you left nothing undone? Could you sit at rest as old Linnaeus sat, having written his 70-odd books, content in his garden in solitude, the sun on his beloved plants, an old cart horse he called himself, worn out by work, not his 65 years. Plants in the royal gardens of England and France bore names he gave them. His students traveled the globe, brought him gifts of strange flora and fauna. Even King Gustav III came to visit, left his escort sitting horseback in the rain. When unsteady, his health broken, still he spoke with strength of heathers and ease. Physician, zoologist, taxonomer, yet it was Prince of Botanists he wished carved on his gravestone, and left instructions for his burial, unshaven, unwashed, unclothed, wrapped only in a sheet, to hasten his return to dirt. Thank you.